back to these meetings.
Is that one or what?
Yes, I believe so. I've never gone back to watch, but you can, right?
Yeah.
And we
Or
also,
like that new rail track section right past Cherry Street,
our
where they
agenda
put the flashing
and
lights
our
in, it makes
minutes
a
are
huge
also
difference.
posted.
You can go to YouTube for the Danvers Community Access Television. And that should show under meetings, I think.
Right.
It's, yeah,
You and me
it's
both.
different how it goes.
Every
but-
time I look, it's like the first time. I'm like, where is this?
Hey, when you're my age, you get to say that, not your
Sometimes I think it's listed by date, so like meetings that haven't happened yet are listed first.
Good evening. Welcome to the March 5th, 2025 meeting of the Town Manager Acts Review Committee. We're at Town Hall tonight, and the members present are Nova, Natalie, John Almeida, Mary Beth Very, Dan Gagnon, Fawn Anderson, Noah Levitt, Mike Matvichuk, John Jaworski is absent, and my name is Sally Calhoun. We have a guest with us tonight, Peter Zuck, who is a former town moderator and a former select board member. And we're so glad that you came. Early in this process, you may recall, I reached out to former select board members and other former leaders in town, asked for input. And some people wrote to us. Some people came to one of our early couple meetings. Peter is able to come tonight, for which I'm very grateful, so thank you. Generally, we would start our meeting with the approval of our last meeting's minutes, but I thought maybe we should do tonight is begin with Mr. Zuck, in case he needs to leave before we get too far into our meeting. So I wanted to let you know, Peter, some of the big challenge, well, first let me introduce you. So Peter is a native of Danvers, born and raised here. Am I correct with that?
You are correct.
And as I mentioned, former town moderator and former select board member. He was a former assistant attorney general. And then, and correct me if I have any of these dates wrong, but in the 90s, he was the project director of the Boston Central Artery Tunnel Project, which has been described as the largest, most complex, most technically challenging urban infrastructure project in U.S. history. How about that?
Is the case.
It was, according to my research, it was a $14.6 billion project.
You got that right. Most don't.
Under his leadership, the Ted Williams Tunnel has been honored by the American Society of Civil Engineers as an outstanding project of 1996. He became Chief Programs Officer and member of the Board of Directors of the London Underground, where he oversaw all construction and maintenance activities, including a $30 billion program of infrastructure improvements called Transforming the Tube. During this period, you may recall, there was a terrorist bombing of the underground in July of 2005. Peter helped supervise the repairs, and through his efforts, the service was fully reestablished within 45 days. He was involved in London's successful bid for the Olympics and the transportation planning and the construction required for those games. Between 2008 and 2011, he oversaw a $100 billion program of national reconstruction in Libya, consisting of 120,000 units of housing and full urban infrastructure in 4 different cities. Sadly, this work was interrupted by the revolution in that country in 2011. In 2017, he became Chief Capital Officer of Metrolinx in Toronto, overseeing a 10-year, $43 billion capital program to provide a regional transportation plan. Currently, Peter practices law in North Andover.
I do.
And Peter has offered to come and share with us some of his thoughts about the process we're in. And I wanted to let you know, Peter, some of the things we've been grappling with, especially at the beginning of our journey here. And with a lot of concern over kind of a lack of preparation by town meeting members coming to the annual town meeting and special town meetings. That's something that kind of bugged everybody here. And also a deep dive, a consideration into form of government. What is best, what's appropriate for the town of Danvers, and discussion about whether representative town meeting is still the way to go or not. After a lot of a lot of thought, we spent a lot of meetings talking about that stuff, we decided to move forward with the task we were given, which was to review the Town Meeting Act and the Town Manager Act and report back to the Select Board and to Town Meeting our recommendations for changes in those documents. Among the things in particular in the Town Meeting Act, again, in our effort to come up with strategies, ideas for how to make that town meeting process more, what's the right word for it? More involved, for the members to be more involved and up to date on what was going on. We've suggested a decrease in the number of members per precinct from 18, where it is now, to 15. Currently, incumbents can just indicate that they'd like to run again, but they don't have to pull nomination papers and get signatures of 10 people to support their run. Well, we're proposing to change that so that even incumbents have to get those 10 signatures. We have revised the Town Manager Act in certain ways to provide some more communication, if that's the right word, between the town manager and the select board, so there's kind of more transparency between those two bodies. And we also took up a recall election provision, which had been presented by a citizen of the town as a citizen's petition, which town meeting voted to send to us to consider as well. So these are some of the large points that we've grappled with. We're thinking of, in our report back to the select board and to town meeting, of including suggestions for how to have town meeting members be more involved. So we have a couple of pretty good ideas, I think, in that regard. So I wanted to give you kind of a sense of a temperature of where we are. Does anybody have anything to add? Those are just kind of broad strokes I came up with as I was preparing for tonight's meeting. So, Peter, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I'm here because you were kind enough to ask me 2 questions, which you asked the other members, former members of the Board of Selectmen. And those 2 questions were, would I recommend any changes to the Town Meeting Act or the Town Manager Act? And in my experience, was there ever any instance in which something went poorly because of something that was in the Meeting Act or the Town Manager Act? And I should probably go back a little bit in terms of what I've done here in the town so you kind of see the perspective to which I came to it. I served as a town meeting member, for 3 years before I was in 1980 appointed as a member of the Finance Committee. In 1983, I ran for selectman and served for 3 terms between 1983 and 1992. From 1992 to 1998, I was the town moderator. So I've kind of been through the chairs that you're considering in the charter. I'm going to put my thoughts into writing because I take the request seriously. But I'll give you a preview of what my answer, first of all, tell you what research I've done to get to this point. I was familiar of the oral history, if you will, of how we had Danvers Town Manager Act. And that really revolved around who the people were who had been on the original committee that recommended that and brought it to the town. And in order to get the Town Manager Act passed, which is kind of a special thing because there's not that many towns in the Commonwealth that have gone the direction of professional town management, they had to go through a town meeting vote, legislation submitted to the legislature, and actually 2 referendums that took place in the town. And those were facts I was not familiar with until I said, gee, I wonder if anybody's done a history of the Town Manager Act. And what I found out is that we have over in the town archives at least 3 files of any history of it. And I don't know, have you had an opportunity to review those materials?
I have not.
Yeah, and I'm going to do a little bit of further research on those and try to get the chronology laid out properly, because I think it is instructive, because you are following in the footsteps of an original, it was not called a charter committee, it was called something else. But the group that originally passed the Town Manager Act, and I'm focused mainly on the Town Manager Act as being, kind of the unique piece. A 1992 review of the town charter, in which there were a number of proposals made to alter the Town Manager Act, which were not approved, and the history of those is also there as well. And of course, you are now adding your names to a pretty proud list of people, all of whom have dealt with this subject matter. And, it's one that I have enjoyed being a part of through my professional life, and actually have taken the lessons that I learned here to other places where I've managed, and some could say I've done a good job. Some people say I did a good job in those places, and of course, on the Big Dig, everybody has an opinion about that. But in answer to the first question, what would I change about the Town Manager Act? I would change very little. And the reason that I would change very little is because of the philosophy of the act, and the second question we'll talk about too, and that is the intent of the Town Manager Act was to move away from what I'd call small town politics of town government as is practiced in Massachusetts, and to have a system of professional management. The words in the charter are to appoint a town manager due to qualifications and fitness alone, skill and fitness alone, and to manage, to allow that manager to manage the entire enterprise. You will see from the research of what things were like in towns that, the original committee thought that the Board of Selectmen had 17 different types of departments that needed to report to them, and decided to go the road of quote-unquote professional management. As best I can remember the numbers, there's probably 30 towns in the Commonwealth that have gone to some form of this and decided to reject it. There's only about 6 or 8 that actually accepted this type of a professional approach to management. And so I think you've hit in your description of the things you're talking about on a key issue. And that issue is the level of preparation of, things in here revolve around an annual town meeting. That's how our government annually reproduces itself, if you will. But I think that probably we've moved out of a place of education, not only, for town meeting members, but with our citizenry in terms of what we're trying to accomplish with town government. The members of the Board of Selectmen in terms of what the role of selectmen is in a professional town government, and as well, kind of what the expectations we should have for a professional manager are, and whether, the pool of candidates that is out there to provide professional management is going to be able to live up to that system. So, answer to the first question, I change very little. I think that the principles that, to me, stand out are nonpartisan. Government in the town of Danvers, though we have a very active Republican Party and a very active Democratic Party, has generally been nonpartisan. My uncle, Victor Tremblay, was the chairman of the Democratic Town Committee at the same time that Gaylord Putnam Emerson, who recently deceased, the owner of Putnam Pantry, was the chair of the Republican Town Committee, and they were the best of friends, because nothing that happened in town government was partisan. We probably don't live in exactly that kind of era anymore, but that is the intent of it. The issue of professional management, the notion is that the selectmen sit as a board of directors, if you will, and set policy for the town. And one of the things that your chair sent to me that I found very interesting and useful was the strategic plan that the town embarked on, because that's the kind of way that a board of directors works. You have a plan and you you give it to a management team and you let them manage and bring back the results. And I think there's little question that professional management is far superior to, you know, a less thoughtful approach of being management-oriented, and we've been richly rewarded with that in the town of Danvers. Brings me to question 2. What, if any, things didn't go well, and I'm not sure the exact wording of the question, but I'll get it right. You know, what things were problems that perhaps pertain to our form of management? I couldn't think of one situation which was worse because of professional management, but I could think of a number of situations in which we were richly rewarded because we had professional management. You'll recall that we used to operate a municipal hospital. And the hospital business, over the time that we operated the hospital, became a business that was not the kind of business that a municipality should be in. And so through professional management and the manager getting the right kind of support for us, we managed to extricate the town from a very, what was becoming a very significant financial burden. So that was a vote for professional management. There are similar stories in the operation of the electric light division. The electric light division, having a town-owned electrical department is something that is not the thing that most towns do, but it is a benefit to the town. And I think that there's only a few towns that do that, but we realize a benefit from that. I also look at kind of the fact that I could go over to a archival center here at the library is an indication that we pay attention and manage some kind of different things. So that is you'll get from me as an answer to those questions. The other piece that people have talked about is the residency requirement. There were only 2 issues in all my time that I was on the Board of Selectmen that we talked about as quote-unquote town charter issues or Town Manager Act issues. One was the residency requirement, which never really came up because throughout all of my time, Wayne Marquis, who was also my high school classmate, you know, was the town manager. He was a resident, so it never really came up. The other issue was the fact that the town accountant, unlike, does not report directly to the manager, but is appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And that's because the finance role is 2 things: managing the finance and auditing the finance. And the audit role is the one that is the reason for an accountant to report directly to the selectmen. But we really don't have that issue so much anymore because there's so much auditing which is done independently for various purposes that doesn't happen. It wouldn't be worth a change of law to go through all of the hoops of that to me to fix that problem, because it isn't a problem. I think people are pretty clear here now that everybody reports to the manager and the manager reports to the board. So those are kind of the preview of where I'll be giving you an answer to the 2 questions which you asked.
Well, it's interesting because the 2 things you just mentioned are 2 items that we discussed significantly or at length when we dealt with the Town Manager Act, which is our recommendation is to remove the residency requirement, and our recommendation is to move the town accountant from being appointed by the select board to being appointed by the town manager. And we've, you know, the statutes that are involved with a town accountant, no matter how that person is appointed, if there's something wrong, they're obligated to
Right.
report that something is wrong.
Yeah,
So-
to me, the other part that I'm happy to hear that, the piece on the town accountant, it's just, you know, when I was looking through the statutes that pertain to town accountants, I think you have to get the wording right in the Town Manager Act about how that gets done, because the legislature has its own reasons for having independent town accountants, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, that's it. But I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have for, you know, my thinking on that.
I have a question. You said that there's very little that you would change in the Town Manager Act?
I would change those two things.
Oh,
Those two
okay, well, there
things.
you go.
I wouldn't.
This is Nova Sabadell, by the way.
Yeah.
I didn't mention your last name before, I don't know why, Nova.
No, it's one
Yeah.
of those things, we look at it and go,
Sorry.
You know, but we've functioned very well without making those changes. But I would endorse those two changes.
Why would you endorse the change of residency, or not require residency?
So, the town square used to be a place. The town square is now not a place. It's a virtual, it's a virtual place. And so somebody who is functioning as a town manager can be just as aware of what the issues and conversations are in the town by that process as by being required to be here in the town. I think it's a full-time job where you have to be here physically, so there would be certain limitations. If somebody doesn't live in Danvers, they need to live close enough to Danvers to be able to get here every day. There is virtue in the town manager being a member of the community that participates in the community, as it were. I know Wayne was a member of the Kiwanis Club, along with other folks, and was from Danvers, but I wouldn't view that as a requirement. Getting someone to be the town manager, in addition to a salary, is probably, if we want to search, among the most qualified people, going to come with a benefits package. You might have to include relocation or even a subsidy to support living expenses. So I think the question is, can somebody effectively be town manager and be aware of his job as easily if they were within commuting distance to here as living in the town? And I would say, as easily living, within reasonable commuting distance. I did hear from some other folks that there is at least, some thought that there needs, the job of the manager, should, and reminding me of something we talked about, the job is outreach into the community, and that absolutely is, part of the job. And so I would expect that even if a town manager did not reside in the community, that they would be present in the community, that acting through the Board of Selectmen, they would have the right level of, personal connection with voters and, applicants and folks of interest in the town. But that could be done in that manner as well.
Now, how did you, tell me where are the archives that you mentioned?
The
At
archival center is over at the Peabody Institute Library, and I called Dick Trask in preparation for this to say, is there any information there that on the Danvers Town Manager Act and the Town Meeting Act? There's 3 files there. There's one which is an informal history of the town manager, former governor of Danvers, done by somebody named Willard Alphin, who participated in the early days. And he did a splendid and well-supported history that would inform the committee on kind of how we got to where we got to in 1949, kind of what happened in 1992 when we took a look at it. And I think you'd find it useful. What I'm gonna do for my own purposes on that is to try to get a copy of that history with the supporting documents, which includes all the legislation which has been a part of this, and try to get a copy of that and get it digitized so somebody has it here in Town Hall, so that that legislative history doesn't have to be, rediscovered again at some point in the future when somebody comes along after your efforts to do that as well.
That's great.
I do have a couple
Questions. We also discussed quite extensively about whether or not some of the boards, so this is Town Manager Act, some of the boards should be somewhat elected, like half elected, half appointed. Do you have any opinion on like the benefits of boards just being appointed by a town manager, or if the constituents should have more say in who's on the board?
Primarily, those discussions mostly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nova, dealt with the planning board.
It did, and like zoning board, planning board.
The zoning board is appointed by the select board.
Right, but those could be, I guess it's sort of elected. But, I mean, so I think some people would think.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah,
So, in addition to being in the management business, I'm still an attorney here in Massachusetts, and if I take it a legal matter, it's usually a land use kind of a matter, and I've had a chance to be involved in some other towns who do things slightly differently than we do here. And, you know, in some places, unlike in Danvers, you know, you'd go to the Board of Appeals and, you know, there wouldn't be an assistant town council sitting there, and, you know, the board would be on their own, and there's a Board of Selectmen, but they don't really get involved in kind of the appeal stuff, and in the planning board, the same thing. I think that whatever you choose in terms of how to manage in that land use planning area of planning and Board of Appeals, you know, you need to be managing it. And and management requires effort and costs money. And the town manager, our system of appointment is an efficient way of doing that. And in my experience, while people can differ about, you know, who's on the board and who's not, our biggest problem has always been getting people who are reasonably qualified to want to serve on those boards, right? And having a town manager, you know, for the manager-appointed boards and making it part of his or her job, make sure that they are doing that outreach that's necessary to get that done, even if they're assisted by the Board of Selectmen, and doing it in a nonpartisan and, you know, non-political way. Although certainly has politics involved in it. The other piece is that we've always had a pretty strong, you know, it's kind of the litany you'd get from an old guy like me is going to be, we're always about 1/3, you know, commercial and industrial, and about 2/3 residential in the town in terms of the establishment of our tax base. Very well positioned in terms of transportation. Probably a little bit too far away from MBTA stations to have that be optimal, but it's gotten better with having Logan Express being here in Danvers. But I think I would not tinker with the appointment system for, you know, our citizen boards, and I think that both of them have excellent. Both of them, you know, the historic preservation. We have a lot of boards that have produced a lot of good results here. And the question you have to ask yourself is, you know, what would be the reason you would be wanting? The selectmen endorse a policy, the town manager, you know, implements that policy. That policy includes land use and development. Land use and development, certainly, you know, there's a long history in Danvers of contention about that. You know, in my history of who were consequential selectmen in the town, you know, Baron Mayer is probably the architect after, you know, 24 years of being a selectman of the kind of the let the manager manage wing of our government, and John George would be the other consequential selectman of my lifetime, who was the neighborhood activist, community planning kind of a person. But both of those things found, you know, their homes on our, you know, boards, and effectively, I think. New challenges now, we can see that coming, but I wouldn't, I think I think commitment to professional management is the road to stay on, because that board knows it's being managed, and then the voters know that they are managing it, and that's where the contention happens. We have elections of 2 selectmen every year, in the third year one, so that people can make those changes. And, you know, an annual town election is not a long time. I saw there might be provisions for recalls. I think recalls would be more trouble than they're worth in terms of the frequency that we already have, and kind of natural change to the Board of Selectmen. And in the Board of Selectmen, the issue remains getting qualified people who are, you know, who are serving, and who are serving with a kind of their knowledge of what we're trying to accomplish here. I was thinking that I had a prop that I was going to bring, but I left it in the car, and it was a at the time of the bicentennial, Frank Mills, who was town moderator, Dan Toomey, who was director of finance, and George, who was member of the Board of Selectmen, did a town handbook. And the town handbook was essentially kind of for town meeting members and citizens to understand how town government is organized and what we're trying to accomplish. So some form of that, not only at the town meeting level, but I think at the board level and the citizen level, is worth investing in. Whether it's, consultants or whatever it might be, to kind of reinforce the reasons we do the things we do.
Well, it's interesting because in the Town Meeting Act, one of the things that we're suggesting is that whenever anybody comes in to pull nomination papers, that they should be given some kind of a packet of information about what the job is, being a town meeting member. And also that after the election of town meeting members each year, that the moderator should have a presentation to new and old town meeting members about, again, the function, the purpose, the procedures of town meeting, but also should include that presentation should also be available like online for people who can't attend, something like that.
I think that's a great idea. Frank Mills, who was the father of David Mills, who's retiring as a selectman, I believe he used to run a session like that for new town meeting members, and certainly did the equivalent of it. But it strikes me that a Saturday session in which kind of people, folk get the opportunity to focus on why we're doing what we're doing and what we're trying to do would be a really useful thing, because there is a reason for it. And you will see as you look at this history of the two acts that, there was definitely a set of decisions made based on a philosophy, and the philosophy was professional management.
Since you were a town moderator, one of the things I'm concerned about is I don't want to be piling too many things up on the moderator's plate. So the language that we came up with is that, after the town election, the moderator would present an informational session at a time and place chosen by the moderator to inform elected town meeting members about their responsibilities, and to encourage active engagement by all town meeting members prior to and during the town's annual meeting and any special town meetings that it might be called. And we also added, town meeting members are encouraged to meet with other town meeting members in their precinct and with their constituents. And that's been kind of one of our themes too, that, each town meeting member is a representative of the people in their precinct. But it's very rare that there's ever any communication between the citizens that live in a precinct and their town meeting members. And we were just trying to think if there's some way to encourage that. John Jaworski, who couldn't be with us tonight, one of his suggestions, and we've kicked this idea around in different formats before, is to maybe have an annual town meeting forum or something, where maybe at the high school, where town meeting members in each precinct could be assigned to a different classroom, and citizens could come in to discuss with their town meeting member representative any issues that they have, so that people know there's a way, there's some place to go if you're having a question or a problem, because that's something we've heard frequently, that people don't know, well, how do I find this out, where do I go to get information? And so we're trying, again, to make that interface between citizens of the town and the town meeting members as facile as we can, I guess.
I like those efforts, and but imagine that during my time on the board, we had the first televised town meeting. We had selectmen's meetings televised for the first time. We didn't have, social media, to any extent. And in my experience, as a town meeting member, as well as an elected official, you do hear from constituents when they're interested in being heard from about certain things. And that would be true at the town meeting level as well. And the things that you're talking about, I wouldn't worry about the town moderator job is the best job in town from my perspective. And I wouldn't worry about burdening them with some responsibility for kind of, education, if you will, in some way, shape, or fashion. And I don't think that Moderator Frazier would mind that either. It's
But
a
she
matter of
does,
fact, yeah.
she already does, she already
Yeah.
does have a class, but for some people who've been elected town meeting member, they can't get to that particular time and place.
Yeah.
And that's just a reality we have to accept, and it's so easy for people to be able to go online to watch a meeting they couldn't attend, or for stuff like conflict of interest laws. That's how we each had to go online and take the course and get a certificate that we had done. I mean, that's so easy to do now, people are used to doing it. So we're just trying to think of ways to encourage people to be involved. It's interesting because this past special town meeting was the first time, we're all town meeting members, was the first time that I went to those pre-meetings because we needed to elect somebody to fill a vacancy in our precinct. So though I've been a town meeting member for many years, and then I was on the FinCom for many years, but it was the first time I attended that meeting. So it was all of us, most of us in the precinct, gathering in one room in the high school. And it was nice, because I didn't know the people that were town meeting members with me in my precinct. You tend to get to the meeting shortly before it starts, and you sit, facing the front. The room isn't dark, but you don't interact a lot with the other people in your precinct. So I just thought it was really a great thing to do. John Jaworski's suggestion is if we would have such a forum, to have it be a specific date every year. He was like, well, it could be like maybe Veterans Day weekend or Martin Luther King weekend. Or I was thinking, what if it was just the hour before the annual town meeting? So everybody gets there a little bit early, go to your precinct classroom, and invite citizens, if they want to come to that meeting to talk to their town meeting representatives about issues they're having, questions they have, problems they want us to address. So it could just be, instead of a separate day, just be the same day as something that's already happening.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Could work. But anyway, just thoughts. Oh, and here's another thing. At the very beginning, we had a great meeting where people from the Mass Municipal Association presented or attended virtually. And we're talking generally about form of government and the different forms of government within the Commonwealth. And that got us going for several meetings about, well, we're a representative town meeting, elected select board, and strong town manager form of government. Should Danvers be something else? Should we be a city format, city council? And what were some of the other versions we were talking about, hybrids of all of that? And again, we decided to focus on the marching orders we were given, which was to review these two acts. That would be an issue taken up at a much deeper level,
Right.
I think. But do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, you will see when you look at the history of how we got to the acts that we have now, that in the beginning, back at the time of the passage of the 1949 Act, there were a couple of more active community organizations. There wasn't a league. There was a League of Women Voters when I was here. There was some type of a League of Voters that was a precursor that wasn't just women voters, that was part of the Town Manager Act deliberations. And they went through, looking at all the forms of municipal government there are in Massachusetts. They went into kind of how the organizations relate to each other internally. And if that's something that the town elected to do again, to do a very thorough examination, I suspect that the meeting will vote to do that, I wouldn't see that as, I'm actually a fan of our form of government when I look at it next to other things that, other flavors that there are in the Commonwealth, and I think it's worked well here, but that doesn't mean that that's always going to be the case, and a more full examination, can be embarked upon at any time.
Well, that's one thing, like, for most of us, we know how things, from our own individual perspective, we understand how things operate here.
Right.
But we haven't had that exposure of having to do something, brushing up against a city format of government. or a hybrid form that's a town, town administrator is another form, where it's not a professional town manager, not a strong town manager, but a town manager or a town administrator who does some things, but the select board or city council still is running the show in a different way than a strong town manager. So we don't have experience, but you've been before different types of municipal boards and municipal structures.
Right.
How is it different? Do you have any particular?
Well, I think that what's different here is the election to put in the hands of an individual, you know, strong management authority, and to be able to enforce that. You know, if you have a 3-member board of selectmen and they're running a town and 2 votes is going to decide on every issue, and they're trying to do things by themselves without, you know, the support of professional management, then there's going to be a certain level of inefficiency in that, and there's also going to be a certain lack of accountability in that. The thing about the town manager is we can hire and fire the town manager, and when we have a town manager and we have not as yet had this situation who is not, you know, fulfilling the wishes of the town as expressed through the Board of Selectmen, we have the opportunity to change that person out, you know, with very little process. But it's a decision, you know, professional management or a form of government approved by the legislature, which is on that continuum of different ways of managing. You know, 3-member boards, 5-member boards. Town administrator is by definition, you know, is not going to be as greatly accountable for result, if you will. And I'm not sure, do we have, you know, any strong voice in the town for, you know, departing from professional management?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it was something that in some of our early meetings, when there were lots of people that would attend, there was some talk about how we should. But I don't think people really grasped what that would mean. That with the strong town manager, we're able to have a team approach. The town manager appoints people to all the different roles and can, as a result, manage them and eliminate some of the cross work between and among boards instead. So, but we didn't, I mean, Mary Beth, what?
Yeah, so I think people think because of the size, you know, because we're bigger than our small little town from years ago, supposedly, that we should be a city. And being a city is going to get us more funding that we may need. So in some respect, I think that's an argument that people might have or do have as to why we should be a city. We're too big to be a little town or have a town manager. But I think it's just the not understanding the different roles of a city, you know, mayor versus a town manager versus a town administrator. So.
Well, you know, it's interesting because really the population has maintained pretty steadily throughout the time. And I looked into this question of access to funds if you're a city or a town, and I was assured that it doesn't matter, that funding, and a lot of the funding that comes from the state is based on the population, not on the form of government within that municipality. Right. So that's what I was told in the research that I did.
So you remind me of something I thought about earlier. So the other piece that is interesting is, you know, how the manager relates to the board. You know, and as you know, the board is limited by open meeting laws in terms of their deliberations among each other. You know, if there's more than 2 of them, they have to have a public meeting. And my experience is that we had a very healthy way of dealing with each other, you know, because Wayne Markey, when he was town manager, always made a point of meeting individually with members of the Board of Selectmen, and all of us that were members of the board had things that we were interested in. And he didn't, you know, share those, the minutes of meetings of those with other members of the board, but they would be reflected in deliberations of the board. And the trick of a five-member board is they get the three people that are supporting the manager, and things are, you know, always good when you've got a unanimous board or a 4-to-1 board, because, you know, life is a little tension-free. When you have a 3-to-2 board and you have contentious issues, life gets a little harder, and the manager has to work harder. Doesn't mean that the results aren't good, you know, either way, but there is that, you know, having a healthy dynamic, and it's not unlike a corporate board, you know. A CEO needs to make sure that they are, you know, tending to their board members, and the board members need to make sure that they're contributing constructively towards a, you know, I guess you call it a joint result. But, you know, communication, you know, is
Is
a
key.
big deal.
And that's kind of what, that's one of the issues we tried to address in our recommended changes to the Town Manager Act. For instance, the Town Manager Act already said that the town manager is the chief financial officer of the town, and also has the authority to rearrange town departments and reallocate functions as he or she sees necessary to create the team they envision. But what, it kind of in response to some things that we'd been told in our earlier meetings, we've decided to include language that says that if the town manager is gonna make changes in how departments are structured, for instance, that he or she will give notice to the board. Or that with hiring and firing, again, to give notice to the board.
I wouldn't do that. And I wouldn't do that because there is a political element to government. There's a political element to town government. If you go away from a system in which the manager, he or she is solely accountable, they are able to organize and reorganize as they see fit. There is a sufficient burden on the manager in that situation to get the support of the Board of Selectmen for what they are going to recommend. And that's going to play out in the operation of the board, and it's certainly always going to play out by the requirement for an annual budget, because the budget is going to be geared towards what your organization is. And the only thing that you'll accomplish by having the manager need to go back to the board for approval of a reorganization is going to be to make it slightly more political than it is, and to get a little bit of lobbying going on there. And I would much rather have my manager be accountable to us as a board about that themselves and be able to justify it to the board, because if they're recommending reduction in departments or, you know, reductions in personnel, it's gonna always get to be harder and more political to have the Board of Selectmen get involved in that. The less that you can have the Board of Selectmen involved in the day-to-day operations of government, the better professional management is gonna work. And in particular, when it comes to something where I think has become slightly more problematic than it was in my day, the dealing with public employee unions, I'm 100% for the manager being solely the person who's able to do that. And selectmen always have a viewpoint and always hear from, you know, friends, relatives, and others who work in the town. And, you know, the town manager, if they've lived in the town, has people who he knows who are in the town. But, you know, those are decisions that are difficult under any set of circumstances. They're made more difficult if you involve more people in them, you know, in the management decision, if you will. So I would not be.
Well, our language was not that they'd have to get the okay of the board to make the changes, but just to notify the board that they'd made changes.
They notify the board by, you know, in after the fact. The board's gonna know that from the way it's proposed in the budget or being notified. I have not ever heard of an instance in which well, have we ever had an instance in which the manager has made a organizational decision that they, you know, have not consulted the board on? I couldn't think of one.
I don't know, I feel like I attended a workshop with the select board at one point, and I could be misremembering this, but that there were things that they felt they didn't know about some of the decisions the town manager had made.
Yeah, that's gonna get to be a problem for the town manager, and it's gonna get to be a problem for the board. And it would be a huge problem if, you know, a member of the Board of Selectmen were hearing about something the town manager did from an organizational standpoint with, you know, third parties or another group in the room. That would be an indication of a not properly functioning relationship between the manager and the board on that particular instance, you know. So, but I'm not sure you can get if this, it's, I'm not sure there's a legislative solution to that, if you will.
Interesting. Did you have something, Claude? Oh, sorry, I thought you were raising your hand. Is there something that any of you feel we haven't discussed or you'd like to ask, or?
Can I just ask a
Please.
question? So I just would like your opinion on, one of the things that we discussed that we were a little confused on was the role of the assistant town manager. And that came up a couple of times when we were, got to the, one of the little clauses about if something happened to the town manager, who becomes, so I think we all kind of automatically assumed, well, the assistant town manager, which, right, isn't the case because
Right.
the, well, what's happening now, so with Rodney taking over right now, because he's the financial officer, and that's really what the town manager is, right? The chief financial officer in a way. So what is your opinion, though, on what the role of a functioning or really good assistant town manager would be?
In my time, we didn't always have a
That was the
assistant
other
town
question,
manager.
yeah.
But the role of an assistant town manager is to assist the town manager under the supervision and direction of the town manager. And once again, if you create, as is the case in the town accountant, you know, being appointed by the Board of Selectmen, kind of division or the opportunity division between pure accountability on the part of the town manager or not, that's, in my view, a problem. I think we've had great, you know, assistant town managers. The other piece is if there's a vacancy in the town manager's position, it's incumbent on the board to fill that vacancy on an active basis. And the only people that can do that is the appointing authority, the members of the Board of Selectmen. So you would be surprised if Baron Mayer were able to be here tonight, you would be hearing what I say in a far more affirmative way, okay? Baron was a executive at General Electric, trained in their system, who was fond, you know, of standing up to town meetings or, you know, whatever it might be, or disgruntled or questioning members of the community, you know, kind of with the, you know, the credo of, and it's become one that I believe in, let the manager manage, you know? If we don't like what the manager's doing, we will change the town manager. And I think that, and so that's a principle, you know, do you organize around that? I think you'll see when you look at this historic information, the kind of the depth to which your predecessors in this very worthy undertaking went to make sure that they had gotten it right in their time in terms of, you know, the strong town manager form of government. It's interesting to me that Beverly considered the town manager form of government and elected not to implement it. We've had a pretty good example over in Peabody. We had an example of what a strong mayor, you know, form of government looks like, which is kind of interesting and different, but and it's a different kind of a place. It is more of a city than Danvers is, but you know, I guess if I came to answer your questions, I have to answer and say I think, you know, the answer is, you know, strong town manager form of government, let and require the manager to manage, and if we need a change because things aren't going right, we change out the manager.
It's kind of interesting because, you know, looking at these two acts, the Town Meeting Act was a change from what had been open town meeting.
Right.
So it was open town meeting, and we've heard of and know of stories of the couple of communities that still have open town meeting, how there can be a real challenge of getting a quorum and all that kind of stuff. So to me, it's, you can understand, I can understand historically why there was a change from open town meeting to representative town meeting. And it took us a little bit to understand what the heck the language was about in the Town Meeting Act, because, you know, it was old, and it was based on stuff that doesn't apply anymore. So kind of once we got our heads around the fact that they were changing up from open town meeting to representative, then it was easier for us to grapple with the language. The strong town manager concept is one that is a little more elusive. I
I would agree with that.
I was able, in my, earlier on in my career, did a lot of public sector labor law stuff, and we represented management, so I had a sense of some of that. What does that mean to manage the whole town, as opposed to having different kind of fiefdoms? And remember that the woman who presented from the MMA talked about a town she went into, and like, the DPW was an entity unto itself, and the police department, and the various departments in town. So like, each department was kind of buying their own paper and pens, and was doing their own HR stuff, or doing their own training. And she had to go in and consolidate all that into a single structure, which to me kind of helped visualize the importance of strong town manager. And we talked before about why to move the town accountant into being appointed by town manager, because it gives the town manager the whole finance team to organize as the town manager sees fit to get the jobs done. And so if everybody is accountable for their part of the finance picture, the town manager has stronger control. So those kind of things started to make more sense. But some of the ideas have just been harder to grapple with, unless you have a situation you've dealt with in real life to think, well, why is that important? Oh, now I see why it was important.
What's the town budget these days? I'm kind of.
144 million?
So let's talk about the salary of the town manager for a minute. If there was something that we should think about, it is whether or not that needs a review to determine whether it should be increased, as well as whether it should be, decreased. Because we're a $144 million enterprise, whether the town manager makes, I think right now we're talking in the area of 220 to 260, and 260 is probably what is being paid to our former town manager in Lexington, another premier strong manager town. I think that is a extremely small price to pay for a good professional manager. And whether we'll see in this current selection process whether we are happy with the level of professional manager that we're able to hire for $220,000 or not. I'd make a case that we've done as well as we've done on professional management. This debate about the town manager's making all this money. They're not making all this money for running a $144 million enterprise, and if we can get better, for tens of thousands of dollars more, I'd go for the tens of thousands of dollars more, because the citizens get a better deal out of that. But that is always if you're on the Board of Selectmen, that's always what you're gonna hear is, how can you pay the manager all this money, do the job.
Interesting.
I wish Baron Muir could be here to say it a lot better than me. And he used to be pretty in your face with people about it.
I think he'd be pretty satisfied with the way you've described it to us.
Yep.
Anything else, guys? Let's see. Well, we're getting just to be about 7 o'clock. Perhaps we should turn to taking up our usual, looking at the minutes from the last meeting.
And I think I will accept your permission to leave. But if you want to, you have my phone number. Please feel free to be in touch with me. I will finalize my thoughts into a written answer to your questions.
Thank you.
I will also, Richard Trask's assistant over in the in the archivist and knows that I want to get kind of this document together. And I would urge you, if you can, if you still have time, to kind of get that legislative history that results in you being here. And you are the successors to a very important process.
It's
Thank
interesting.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Peter.
Cheers. Thank you for having me. I always like to talk.
So,
night.
thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
So, our last meeting was February 19, and though I had emailed the minutes to everybody, I'm concerned it doesn't seem that the red line version comes through. So, Ann Freitas has very kindly made the color copies for us. But I'm not sure if that's sufficient to have allowed you to prepare to vote on to accept, on whether or not to accept these minutes tonight. So I'll defer to what you all think. Are you ready? Yes, I'm not sure why, there's a couple of different colors in here, and I can't tell you why.
Oh, okay.
I think I do know. The green is some research information that Ann found about the difference between boards and commissions. That
It's
was,
more definition type of.
yeah, it's not specific to the town, it's a kind of a generalized definition that she very kindly found. And then I think to make the motions more clear in the midst of all the text, I think she put that in blue. Who moved for what and who seconded and what our vote was. And the red is basically the changes that we all voted to accept. And then I went through the minutes, going back to all the dates we considered the Town Manager Act, and incorporated them in this other red line document that we distributed tonight. Yours are copied double-sided, but it shows, as far as I know, I tried to capture all the changes that we voted, but I would like to give you all a chance, maybe between now and our next meeting, to go through it and to make sure that you agree it's accurate. I already found some typos in this version, and some suggestions that we can talk about in a minute. But moving back again to the February 19 minutes, is there any discussion? Do I hear a motion?
A motion to accept the minutes from the February 19th meeting,
Thank you.
as is.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You weren't here. Okay. But everyone else voted in the affirmative, right? Okay. Then, as to the red line version of the Town Manager Act, which I handed out, one question that I have for you is whether we should propose changing the name. For instance, to the town, I had a suggestion, what did I do with it?
It's in the minutes.
I think it was towards the end. Instead of the Town Manager Act, call it an act to establish the town manager form of government in Danvers, or the Town of Danvers Governance Act, or some other such. Because it's a little bit misleading. You see the little subtitle here, it's called Danvers Town Manager Act, and then below that, an act relative to the form of government in the town of Danvers.
I wouldn't say an act to establish, because.
It's already been established.
Yes.
Though this,
Okay.
yeah. So perhaps the Danvers,
Danvers Danvers Town Manager Act.
or the Danvers Form of Government Act.
I mean, I question, like, I mean, we already have the descriptor in the title of the act, which, like, I think the most accurate way would be something along the lines of, you know, the Form of Government Act, but we've already got that in this subheading. I do think, well, I should say, I think it's more accurate to describe it as the Form of Government Act. But we also have this Town Meeting Act over here, that's an important part of our town government. So I guess, like, I can see the benefit of just keeping it as the Town Manager Act, so we're not like saying this is the be-all, end-all of our town governance, because we have this other statute over here that is another piece of it.
I was just gonna agree with that I think, all clunky as it may be, I think it makes sense because there is a Town Manager Act and the Town Meeting Act, and although it is a town manager form of government, to John's point, town meeting is an integral part of that form of government, so I would vote to sort of leave it as it is, and that there be two separate acts that clearly delineate, one is town manager, one is town meeting. So that would just be
Okay,
my view, not to change it.
okay.
I would also stick with the same for those reasons they were given, to make clear that someone wouldn't just look at that thinking it was everything and then come up short and not realize they had to look for a second one to.
Okay, we can leave as is, it's just a question I wanted to pose. So, we'll leave it as is. One thought that I had is, you see, in our last meeting, February 19th, we talked about where the recall elections provision should be, and people thought put it in as section 12 after removal of town manager. But as I was changing the kind of table of contents section, we have several sections that deal with town manager. Section 8, appointment of town manager. Section 9, town manager vacancy. Section 10, town manager designee. Section 11, removal of town manager. And now section 13, town manager compensation, and then 14, duties of town manager. I was thinking, well, maybe the recall election should really be after all the town manager. So that would move recall elections and renumber things, but move it to after town manager, after duties of town manager.
I was actually thinking it should be put up higher
Yeah.
after the
7.
elected officials sections. 'Cause that's
After-
where it would be recalled.
Like after Article
After-
6
After, yeah, so it would be 6, or,
or 7. You'd make it 7.
yeah, you could do it after multiple office holding, but somewhere where these are all the elected positions, and the recall is about elected positions, so maybe.
That's a good point, yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense. Do you want to make that into a motion?
I move that we put the recall elections section, we move that up to section 7 after multiple office holding in the Danvers Town Manager Act.
Second.
Which would require renumbering 7 through 11.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is there any further discussion? Sorry, I'm just trying to jot down. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the other kind of typos that I noticed is at the top of page 3, you know, we'd been capitalizing annual election throughout, so I thought we might as well do it here. Another that I saw Oh, it's a question for you, Mike, to help me on this one. In section 7, which is on page 5. I'll wait till you catch up.
Oh,
It should be 0.02, shouldn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
This is-
Okay. The next one I found was on page 6. One, two, three, about the fourth line from the bottom. You'll see the word Chair of the Select Board and Town Clerk or Justice of the Peace, and the word "and" shouldn't be there. And then there's also a misspelled word required in the next line. So I'm just pointing out to you typos that I saw, that if you're all okay with them, I can go in and change them.
Yeah.
But I'll wait to do that till our next meeting, when you all had a chance to go through this whole red line thing, because you most likely will find more.
I would have one other proposal, if it's not premature, to bring it up now rather than next
Yeah.
meeting. It's on page 9, section, the recall election. I'm wondering, since we're numbering our sections, or delineating our sections by number, if it's awkward to have the subsections of section 12 labeled by numbers.
I thought so too.
Just change them to A, B, C, D, E, not even call them a section, just A, B, C, D, E, similar to what we do with the, what page was it on?
Like it's same thing in section, page 13, it's the same way.
Yeah,
Yep. I think it's a good idea.
What was the other section you just were talking about?
Section 14.
On page 13, it shows that it's the AB,
right,
you know.
right.
That's what I
Okay. Thank you. Let me see if I've had any others.
So, in section 14, since it got modified, in accordance with provisions of this act and except as otherwise expressly prohibited by general laws, and after 30 days notice to the select board. Do we still like that?
I'm sorry, where were you?
Section B of, section 14B.
Section 14, okay, hang on.
On page 13. Yes, sorry, please. Where we added "and after 30 days
Yeah.
notice to the select board." Just questioning if we still would like that.
I mean, but,
Just after,
yeah, kind of our earlier discussion of that, and he kind of reaffirmed what I had thought about it, was a town manager who does these things without letting the board know that he or she is doing these things is really not doing a very good job as a town manager. And I'd be surprised, honestly, if there were major reorganizations going on that a select board didn't know about ahead of time. I'm not sure, I understand that some people felt that the last town manager did certain things without informing folks, but I don't think it was the Board of Selectmen that were in the dark. I think it might have been other people in the town government who might not have seen things coming, but I would be really surprised if the select board isn't apprised of major shakeups going on within departments of the town.
So you're saying that maybe we should consider getting rid of the 30 days notice provision here?
I think, kind of, the point that he was making is that these communications have to happen anyway, unless, I would think that the town manager would be acting at risk of kind of the renewal of the next contract, if that communication isn't happening. So I don't know that it's necessary.
Because there's a few other places where we inserted language. For instance, at the end, on the next page, at the end of section C, this says, section C says that the town manager can appoint or remove employees, except for the school department and the library. And we added a sentence at the end that the town manager would notify the select board of every such appointment and removal. And there's another point too where we talked about the town manager giving at least a monthly report. In light of what Peter Zook said tonight, these kinds of provisions maybe are not appropriate or needed, but,
I like setting the expectation coming in, especially with a new town manager coming in. I mean, granted, this won't be ready at that time, but I always just think sort of, it's not a mandate, it's not well, it is in a way, but it's a gentle sort of like, well, this is what we expect. We expect that you're gonna be in good communication. Some people aren't as good of communicators as others, and over something about communication, if we could help it from the beginning, rather than there is an issue, and then you have to deal with, well, do you remove, or do you bring in a mediator and help everybody have a kumbaya moment, and get on board about better communication? I think this just like sets the expectation, you're gonna be in good communication with the board. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I would say that with the employee section, section C, I think that has value of informing them after a town employee has left or a town employee has been removed. I think of, as a teacher, that at most towns at their school committee meetings, the superintendent reports personnel change is always like an item on their regular agenda. And I think that that's fine, and we have the good old legal wording of, collective bargaining agreements. With the department's part, I agree with kind of what was said earlier, that if the town manager wants to keep his job, he knows he has to tell the select board ahead of time, because he needs to make sure that there is that support. Same with like the school committee example, because as a teacher, I've watched more of those in other towns, not in Danvers. And a superintendent would never suggest something at a school committee meeting unless they were already sure that they had support. And I can only think of one time in a different city, a different place, where a superintendent kind of got out ahead of their board, and they were done in June. They did not make it through the year because they had not been keeping that notice. So I think it's kind of just baked into the process that if you want to keep being the town manager, you need to make sure you have the majority votes.
Is there a way to compromise and say that they have to be notified, but it doesn't need to be 30 days? Like, they don't have to have a time frame to reorganize? Like, they can reorganize, but they have to let the select board know before they do it. It doesn't have to be a month before.
Maybe
But-
similar to section C, where it just says they will notify.
Yes.
I think I agree with that. I guess I look at it from the flip side, which I think it's the flip side of what you're saying, John, which is, thank you. I don't see a problem with these statements that encourage communication as long as they're not so strict and black and white that they weaken the town manager's ability to work. So I think taking the 30 days out, to me, accomplishes that, but it still leaves that implication that communication is really essential and expected. And it also doesn't tell them how to communicate. I mean, it really could be effective communication walking down the hallway and passing in the hallway and saying, hey, just make sure you know this is happening, and that could be enough. So it really does give leeway, I think, for how the communication occurs.
So if we were gonna pull it out of where it is now in section B, that talks about the town manager, in accordance with this act and except as otherwise prohibited by the general laws, and after 30 days notice to the select board, can reorganize, consolidate, et cetera, departments. I think if we're thinking about taking that notice type of provision out, then instead we just put at the end, thank you, at the end, something like, the town manager shall notify the select board of any such change, without saying when it has to happen.
I just share just one thought. So I think the crux of, I think, Peter's concern was, I think initially thought we were saying vote, but I still think his concern was valid of sort of, is this gonna, in a sense, handicap the town manager or slow them down? And as I'm rereading this, what does reorganize mean? Like, is this gonna create a situation where every sort of minor change requires a notification to the select board? Because reorganize could mean we change someone's job position, job responsibilities very slightly, was I need to go to the select board, you know what I mean? So I think that was sort of a concern that he had that I think was valid in terms of, are you gonna make the town manager less effective because they won't be able to sort of make some of the everyday decisions they would need to make through the course of being town manager? I mean, I think if we're gonna keep it, I would agree with others who've suggested we remove the 30-day notice, just because there might be some things that, like you said, that it might just be a very minor thing, like, oh, the assistant town manager is taking on this new initiative. It's a small project or something like that. So I just wanted to, that was from what I understood to be Peter's concern, was sort of essentially, creating roadblocks for the town manager. And I think that 30-day notice period could create some of those roadblocks.
So would anybody like to make a motion to remove this clause from section, what's numbered now, 14B? Or do you want me to just, well, I think it's significant enough. I think we should have a motion. It's one thing to correct the typo, or to capitalize something to be consistent with other parts. But this is kind of a significant change from what we had voted before. So I think we should have a motion and a vote, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I guess the question is, do we just want to remove it, or do we want to replace it with something else? And I think there's differing opinion. I wouldn't want to vote to remove it unless we had decided whether or not we were going to replace it with something else, I guess.
Well, I
And
would,
I'm not sure, or add something, right?
I'm in
Well,
favor of adding at the bottom, but without the 30-day notice, for what it's worth.
I was going to just make a motion to say, said town manager, in accordance with the provisions of this act and except as otherwise expressly prohibited by general laws, and after notifying the select board, may reorganize, consolidate, or abolish departments. So it's just that they have to be notified, so that could still be in there, but just remove the 30 days.
So, but one difference, though, from what some of the discussion is that you want it to be advance notice.
Oh, right, so it would, well, I mean, I don't know that, I feel like if they're gonna bother to, if we're gonna bother to tell them that they need to notify the select board, it does need to be in advance, it's not, otherwise, they're gonna find out at some point.
Yeah, I think that was the issue before, it was finding out after the fact that something happened, so,
Right.
yeah.
But,
I guess I don't know that notifying them after the fact is really a problem, because the town manager is supposed to be empowered with these abilities, and notifying them ahead of time, to me, seems like it's tantamount to asking for permission, and I don't think that's how it's supposed to work. I think what keeps coming up at this table is that we want communication, not steps of power and permission. And so what if the wording were something like, prohibited by the general laws with notification to the select board?
Or to just pull it out of this part and say at the end, the town manager will keep the select board, will notify the select board of such changes, or something like that.
Yeah, and let the town manager decide if he or she wants to do it before or after.
yes, sure.
Some may
That sounds
want
good.
that sort of sign of respect and let them know ahead of time. And maybe some person might not think needs to be done that way. So let the individual town manager decide if it's gonna be before or after.
Right,
And-
to your
and-
exact point, that they do things differently, and, yeah.
And same with the select board members. I mean, some might say, could you let me know? I'd love to know this information before you do it, and some might be like, that's fine, you can do it whenever. I don't know. So,
Should we make a motion?
Sure.
I move to remove the red line "and after 30 days' notice" to the select board and replace it with a statement at the end that Sally just read very eloquently a moment ago.
I didn't write it down until
That
after.
Sally just spoke a moment ago.
That's recorded, so we can.
When I've written it, and
And
I'm
what?
not sure I caught it, but it's, to add at the end, the town manager shall notify the select board of such change.
Right, perfect.
yeah.
I'll
changes.
second that motion.
Okay.
So who made the initial motion? Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
And we didn't have 30 days elsewhere in the document, did we? Because can we just like make a blanket motion that if there is, we'll we'll use the same language?
Let's not look through.
Okay, so actually, in
We
section,
have to take a vote on
I'm
this.
so sorry.
It's okay. So, on the motion that's before us, is there any further discussion? And I do think it's more effective to go section by section than try to say anywhere in this document where this phrase is used, because that's harder for me. To then incorporate that change as I'm going through section by section. So on this motion, which deals with section 14B, and the motion is to remove the red line clause that reads, "and after 30 days' notice to the select board," just to remove that, and instead at the end, add the sentence, "the town manager shall notify the select board of such change." That's the motion. Is there further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And I'm sorry, Paul, I interrupted you.
No, I interrupted you. Section F, page 15, it does specify, said town manager shall keep full and complete records, shall render as often as required by the select board, but not less than monthly, a full report of all operations.
Well, actually,
Is
we
that-
eliminated the words "full" and "all," so it's just a report.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, yeah, that is red
A
line. I'm
report of
sorry.
operations.
A report of operations, but not less than monthly. Do we consider that to be similar?
I think that's
No?
different. I think it's just saying each month they need to report on what they're doing, which, again, sort of, they would probably do that anyways, but.
I mean, it's hard to know whether this is something that just, when I'm asking somebody to do something, if it's something that, if it's a document they can pull out of something they're already working on, I'll say, well, just give me that, don't create something new. I don't know if this is onerous, if this would be onerous, if we should change it to quarterly. What we're trying to anticipate and encourage is communication. Is monthly not a good marker to use?
So I do believe during a select board meeting currently, the town manager does update the board on any updated information. And sometimes he will say, or she will say, the report I've provided you, and then sometimes they will pull out of that report specific things they want to highlight. So at least sometimes on the school committee side, that's, a report is given monthly. I do believe also at the select board meeting, the town manager will speak to a monthly report. So,
So you think it's kind of already something that's
yes,
a normal part of operations?
yes. But I do think to include it in this is just a reminder that you will report monthly in some way, which again would be at their meeting, whether it's a written report or a verbal report during that said meeting.
And I was gonna say the same thing, like, to me, report could be verbal, so I don't view it as, if your concern was that it would be onerous, I don't really think it is, because, it could just be a verbal update of that week.
I'm wondering if we inadvertently used the word less when we meant more.
you don't want them to give a report more than monthly?
I think the intent of the statement is that they'll get a report at least every month.
Right.
So wouldn't that be more, but not more than monthly? Not extending beyond 30 days?
That's not how I,
Yeah.
but, so right now they get it probably,
Thank you.
Twice a month, they get those,
Right.
at the select board meetings, they get updates. So that would be more than monthly? So to me, I read it as, if this said, but not more than monthly, it would be like, you can't give us more
it's
than
only
one a
12 a
month.
year.
Right, you give us one a month, and that's it.
Would it help to change it to, but at least monthly?
I think that's clear,
okay.
or more
Sure.
clear, yeah.
We could also give it a but.
Yes?
Yep. That's good editing right there. I appreciate that.
So do you feel that we need to vote on that change, or is that more of a,
No,
It's kind of a logistics, that's, yeah.
We mean the same thing.
does anything leap out to anybody else? Again, I think this project or this task warrants everybody taking time between now and our next meeting to kind of comb through this, because I'm sure there's stuff that I didn't catch, and I would appreciate everybody's input.
And then Sally, this separate page you gave us for the section 36 is for that as well.
Thank you for the reminder. So the handout I've given tonight is a suggestion for section 36, to add this as section 36. This act shall be reviewed by the town of Danvers at least once every 10 years, or if requested by a majority vote of the town meeting members at an annual or special town meeting sooner. And it's phrased oddly, because originally when I wrote that it shall be reviewed by the town at least once every 10 years or sooner if requested by the town meeting. But I thought that would mean that it could happen not every 10 years, that, you know what I mean? That it'd be at least every 10 years, it has to happen, or town meeting can ask for it to happen sooner or in less period of time than 10 years. That's what I was trying to capture, and I'm sure there's a more artful way of saying that. Yes.
This is revisiting something that we discussed at the last meeting, and if no one wants to hear it, that's fine. But I'm coming at it from a different angle, though. So in the town, in the Town Meeting Act, we have 20 years. And then here we're saying 10 years. The reality is they're not gonna split them up. We're gonna go, if they're gonna revisit the Town Manager Act, they're gonna be tasked with doing the Town Meeting Act as well. So I would propose consistency between the two being 20 years, not 10 years.
Shocker.
So some others might take the other approach, put 10 years in both. But my point is that we shouldn't have two different timeframes for the two different acts, because it's gonna get reviewed at the same time.
Right.
And I'm going to propose what I proposed last meeting and say 15? Do we split the difference
I'll take 15.
And do-
15 too, would be happy.
with both, on both, 15 years on both?
Well, so I just have a question, because in my wrong, I thought the reason the town meeting act was 20 was because of the census, right? So, it was because of the census
Oh, right.
and the changes in population and precincts, so that's why. So 15 really wouldn't
You're right.
Wouldn't work.
work for that, so.
Right.
I was in favor of 10 years, although I think John makes an excellent point, that in 10 years, are we gonna have an issue where it comes time to do this, they're gonna say, wait, do we have to do, and then there's gonna be a whole thing, so. I appreciate your different angle on this.
John is like bound and determined he's gonna win on that 20 years.
I don't know, you've kind of shifted my view here because,
Oh, you traitor.
well, no, but here's my thought, I mean, there is, because Sally wrote it with the mechanism for if town meeting decides, we could do it sooner. So there is that mechanism if, for whatever reason, in 8 years, 12 years, whatever it is, we say, this isn't working, we need a dramatic change, it could go before town meeting. So there is that mechanism for doing it sooner if needed, but 20 at least provides that, you know, alignment to the town meeting act, so. Sorry to be a traitor.
Yeah, I'm with, I just, 20 just feels too long at this
does.
point.
But when you think,
2005
but when
was
you think about it,
different.
the
It
town,
was 20 years, feels like.
the Town Manager Act was last reviewed in 97? I thought it was 93, that's why I'm hesitating. That was a long time ago. And the Town Meeting Act was last reviewed in 73, that's where the 73 came from. So compared to those timelines, maybe 20 doesn't feel so long. But I can tell you, I felt that the difficulties in the beginning, for me anyway, I think for all of us, was these documents, just the way they were phrased, it was hard for us to understand them. And that's part of my reason for suggesting let's have them do them sooner. But that's just, you know, I think it makes sense to try to have them both be at the same time. Maybe what we could do is everybody reviews this red line version and also look at the red line version of the Town Meeting Act now, because I think there's some inconsistencies between the two of them that we need to resolve. And then, again, maybe at our next meeting, we can have a review article that's the same or is the same as much the same as they should be for the two. I do think that there, you know, for instance, there's Finance Committee references in both acts. I just want to make sure that they're consistent. And I feel like just some of the phrasing we use, we got hung up on calling it representative town meeting a lot in the Town Meeting Act, and we kind of got away from that in the Town Manager Act. So I just think that we need to do a little bit of work consolidating the two. So why don't we leave the time frame as part of that overall discussion? One thing that I wanted to point out, and though it's only 7:37, we have a meeting scheduled for April 2nd. I'm going to be out of town.
As will I.
Pardon me?
I said, as will I.
Oh, okay. My proposal was going to be, should we cancel, or my question was, should we just cancel that meeting? Though certainly you all could conduct a meeting if I'm not here. It's not, we can do whatever you all would like to do, but I wanted to give some advance notice so that we release the room that we're meeting in, for one thing. And also to talk a little bit about kind of what our next steps would be. I think for our next meeting, we need to look at these red line versions and eliminate any conflicts between them. We need to talk about some of the issues that John Jaworski called and wanted me to bring to you tonight, was again that town meeting forum idea that I mentioned when Peter Zook was talking. And I gotta say, that night when I was at that preliminary meeting before town meeting to vote on a new town meeting member, it was really nice to meet the other representatives in my precinct, because I knew one or two of them, but not all of them. And so that's where I thought, well, maybe it could be that same night. Though it's already tough, those meetings can last a long time, and to think adding a whole hour to the front, maybe that's too much. But maybe everybody could think a little bit about that concept, which we've kicked around at other meetings. At the end of our last meeting, we talked some more about, you know, how can we encourage town meeting members? Accountability was the word we used, but I also think involvement is one, which goes with that. We asked what our report to the select board should look like, and I was thinking that for our next meeting, I could come up maybe with an outline. So we can kind of begin, and then I'd be happy to kind of do a first draft that we can then all kind of pick apart. And so, as, again, between now and our next meeting, if any of you has an idea about what you think should be included in the report to the select board, why don't you email me your thoughts so I can try to include that in an outline. And it might be helpful to do some of that historical research that Peter was referencing. And I know we have a historian on our board.
I was interested when he said something about in 1992, they tried this and it didn't get passed.
Yes, actually,
That's not-
Pat Fraser was on that committee, and she's talked with me a little bit about it. That the committee came up with a recommendation, and then she had a minority report objecting to some of the things that were being recommended. And the town meeting voted not to go forward with the recommendations. And I don't know really what they were, but the way I've heard it is that it was, that the final action was supportive of the Professional Town Manager Act.
Oh, so maybe someone was trying to, maybe one of the recommendations was to abolish the strong town manager or something.
Or to remove pieces and parts of it.
Yeah.
I remember hearing that one of the issues at the time had to do with the electric department. I don't know what all the details were. I wasn't around then, so I don't know. But yeah, so it stayed in place. Some of the changes were not adopted, which is something that we should be prepared for, by the way. We could make all these proposals and,
Think of none of
and
it.
they, you know, and that's what we should. But part of our effort, I think, I see multiple steps. Part of it is to shake up every town meeting members and anybody who wants to be a town meeting member, say, hey, look, guys, this is an important job. Let's find ways to do it better. So that's kind of one thing. And another is that openness of communication between the town manager and the select board. We've heard hints, nothing real specific about people not knowing what was going on. So to show, look, we tried to address that. It's to address the issues that we've heard of. And people might say, well, we don't think this language will help in that, and they could reject it. So anyway, so part of the function is to show that we consider these issues. Whether town meeting adopts it or not is another question. I think those were all the things I had kind of put in my notes of things that we still have left to do. Am I missing anything? Okay.
I think we should probably just take that April 2nd meeting off if you're not gonna be here. It would give us like a week, a little one time off to regroup and before we tackle the report and kind of get into all of that.
I have a list of our meetings here.
Yeah, so we have one scheduled for March 19th,
Right.
Right,
so we'll just take the April 2nd off.
yeah. And then we start talking about the report that next April meeting.
And my goal is to submit the report, I think by May 14th. After that, I'm going to be out of town for a week or two. So my goal is to have it done, before we go. But I also think that's helpful to the select board because they will have reorganized and it'll give them some time to look at our report before they're able to take it up at their June meeting. So it kind of, the time frame seems to fold together. It's not all based on my schedule, but I kind of used that to try to structure my thoughts in time, so we'll take that April 2nd meeting off, and I'll let Pat know. Our next meeting is scheduled for 2 weeks from tonight, on March 19, at the Senior Center. So So I try before every meeting to come in a list of the stuff that I want to make sure we touch on, but I don't want to exclude any other ideas or thoughts anybody else here had for something you wanted to discuss tonight.
I mean, I just asked, we have a couple of guests in attendance if they have
Thank you.
anything they want to share.
So that's what happened when I turn around. Do you guys have any questions for us?
I just have one quick thing.
Why don't you come up to a microphone? I don't know if that one's on.
It never works anyways, you can never hear anything.
So why don't you come over to this one?
Okay. Just a quick question. I'm not sure if it's already been implemented in the program here, and I don't
Maybe
have
you
it in
could
front
tell
of
us
me.
your name.
Oh, I'm
first.
sorry.
That's okay.
Sandy Francischini. I am a member here of the town, Precinct 6, Wildwood Road. And the last couple of meetings that I've attended for the Board of Selectmen, the chairman had asked for reporting from the police department and the airport. And I wasn't sure if that's typically done through the town manager because Rodney's filling in right now. So I didn't know if they should have some kind of wording for those reports as well, because I think you guys said 30 days notice, something like that, so also include any kind of other reporting, because I don't know if that's done normally already with other departments as well, or to also put that verbiage in there saying we want a particular report, and also have some sort of time frame so that the departments and such can give these reports and such as well.
Well, it's a really interesting question. So what we're looking at is just the Town Manager Act, which talks about what the town manager's function is. So we were talking about a report from the town manager to the select board.
Okay.
The town manager would have the authority to request, like the police department or any other department, to make reports to the town manager. I don't know about the airport. I don't know that structure, how it fits into town manager versus select board stuff. Do you?
Well, I know, oh, so maybe you have more. All I have is that it's actually run by the city of Beverly. The board is, our two members on the board are appointed. We recommend people for that board, and the city of Beverly
Right.
accepts them or doesn't accept them. And I don't know how often they report to the select board.
Does the select board have a liaison to that committee as well? I know.
They just picked somebody, they had interviewed someone to take that position.
Okay.
It was just mainly because residents were complaining about stuff and they felt like they weren't being heard. So I don't want to put words in the chairman's mouth, but he said he wanted to have some reporting because he wanted to see how many complaints were depleting or if they were increasing, what the issues were. So just to have that form of communication and such too. So I didn't know if it fell into this category. Like I said, I apologize, I don't have it in front of me. But I'm just trying to learn all of this and see how this all works too. So I just want to make sure that everything is documented, everything is voiced or.
I do think that if the select board is appointing a committee, like
Okay.
the airport, they would be the board to request that they
Okay.
come before them. To Sally's point, the town manager would request that any department that should come and present in front of the select board or provide a report, the town manager would request it from that department head, so the police chief, the fire chief,
Right.
electric light department. In the past, it hasn't really been, well, in the last 10 years, the town manager hasn't necessarily requested that unless there was an issue.
Right.
But I think, obviously we're getting a new town manager, that if there's any community forum or any opportunity for the community to go and say, hey, these are some of the things that we would like to see happen, then that new town manager could work that into maybe once a month, a meeting, or throughout the year, like, March, police department comes, May, fire department, like whatever. But those could be recommendations, but that would be how I would think that typically
It wasn't something that would
works.
say necessarily mandatory, but just in case like they ever wanted something like that it's documented to say how much time or.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this is kind of not our purview, but the select board, where there have been issues with the Beverly Airport, and because we have a minority voice in that particular committee, because it is mostly in the city of Beverly, I think the select board should be requesting more information just so that our residents do know, and, but any resident can go to the city of Beverly and whenever they have the airport meetings too. But again, being in Danvers, we're, a small side or portion of that airport, so I think some people feel that we're not being heard. But true or not true. But,
I'm not
you
trying to
know.
be excited, like trying to.
Yeah,
cause
yeah,
anything. I just
yeah,
was
yeah.
curious, just to
No,
make sure
no,
that something
but
was-
that, yeah,
Just
that
wondering
would be
if
how
I'm going
that,
along too, so.
that would be how it would fall. Just to what, like Peter said, the town manager manages, so that would probably fall mostly under his responsibility.
That's okay. Just one more thing with the airport. I don't know if you were at the meeting, it was probably about a month ago, where they had an update. Maybe it was more than a month ago. Someone came from was it, okay. And I don't think that was the chair of the board. I think it was actually like who runs the Beverly
Right,
Airport,
believe
which
it
I,
was.
which I
Forgot
believe
his
is
name.
like,
He has a jump tall with the glasses.
yes,
he was-
but I think he's FAA. Like, I don't even think he's a Beverly employee.
I thought they were new employees
Yeah, I think they just hired, I heard too.
Right, but
Manager, airport manager.
But I don't know that that's a City of Beverly employee, or if that's more of a
He's just at the
federal.
airport, right? Just-
Right, if it's,
The manager of the airport is the city of Beverly.
it is, it's not federal, it's not an FAA.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, I appreciate it.
We don't know
Thank
either.
you. That's okay, thank you.
Anything else? Well, thank you guys all so very much. It is 7:50. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, I was surprised there was a hesitation about making a motion. Thank you all very
We can
much.
talk
I
more about
really
the-
appreciate
Just
it.
kidding.